Welcome, everyone. Glad to see you here. Thank you for taking time out of your lunch to meet with us today and talk about Matthew 25. We are grateful for the Reverends Robin Garvin and Tom Berry and their willingness to facilitate this conversation today. So turning it over to them, and thank you so much.
All right. Well, according to my outline here, I'm gonna welcome us all and open us with prayer. And actually, I'm going to read also through Matthew 25 verses 31 through 46. So let us go ahead and open with prayer. Let us pray. God of creation, we come before you today. We ask that you open our eyes and our hearts, our minds and our ears as we move forward. Help us to hear and know what you would have us hear and know, and help us to do what you would have us do. In your Son's name we pray. Amen. So Matthew 25, verses 31 through 46. Now when the human one comes into his majesty and all his angels with him, he will sit on his majestic throne, and all the nations will be gathered in front of him, and he will separate them from each other, just as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. He will put the sheep on his right side, but the goats he will put on his left. And then the king will say to those on his right, "Come, you who will receive good things from my Father. Inherit the kingdom that was prepared for you before the world began. I was hungry and you gave me food to eat. I was thirsty and you gave me a drink. I was a stranger and you welcomed me. I was naked and you gave me clothes to wear. I was sick and you took care of me. I was in prison and you visited me." Then those who are righteous will reply to him, "Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you drink? When did we see you as a stranger and welcome you, or naked and give you clothes to wear? When did we see you sick or in prison and visit you?" And then the king will reply to them, "I assure you that when you have done it for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you have done it for me." And then he will say to those on his left, "Get away from me, you who will receive terrible things. Go into the unending fire that has been prepared for the devil and his angels. I was hungry, and you didn't give me food to eat. I was thirsty, and you didn't give me anything to drink. I was a stranger, and you didn't welcome me. I was naked, and you didn't give me clothes to wear. I was sick and in prison, and you didn't visit me." And then they will reply, "Lord, when did we see you hungry or thirsty or a stranger or naked or sick or in prison and didn't do anything to help you?" And then he will answer, "I assure you that when you haven't done it for one of the least of these, you haven't done it for me." And they will go away into eternal punishment, but the righteous ones will go into eternal life. Matthew 25. Do you want to go first and introduce yourself, Robin, and I'll stop talking for a second?
Sure. Happy to. Hello, friends. Welcome to our time. So I am Robin Garvin. I'm currently the transitional pastor at Valley Community Presbyterian in Portland, Southwest Portland. And I am a pastor of a Matthew 25 congregation, as well as recently attended the Matthew 25 Summit for our denomination. And so I guess out of the strength of that, I was asked to help facilitate the conversation today, but that's who I am. Tom, who are you?
I am Tom Berry. I am the pastor at Bethany Presbyterian Church, the Southern Bethany. I'm learning that I have to remind or mention that, since sometimes it brings confusion. So I'm down in Grants Pass, and I got involved with and interested in Matthew 25. I knew of it, but I really didn't get involved with it until I came here. It's been 6 years, however you figure COVID years, add or minus, but 6 years in this presbytery, and got involved with through Brian Herron, and have been trying to, and maybe not too well, been trying to be kind of a cheerleader and a resource person for our presbytery, and I've made some connections, but I thought with this conference coming up this would be a good way to kind of maybe get me a little bit more excited and a little bit more on point and make more connections. So going to this conference was fantastic. And it's also helped me, my congregation that I serve is also a Matthew 25 congregation. So it's helped me get a little bit more clarity and focus on what that means for us as well.
All right. Thanks, Tom. We were interested in just getting a sense of where in the Presbytery people hail from. And I mean, some of you I can tell. Scott, I can tell that you are at First Church in Corvallis. And Eileen, I'm remembering you're at John Knox, is that right? In Kaiser. Gosh, that's pretty good. My memory's all right. Milt, would you remind us of what church you are representing?
I am also First Church Corvallis.
Yeah, that's right. Okay. And Bill?
Recently retired from First Church Astoria.
Astoria, right. Okay. And Susan?
Pastor at Kenilworth Presbyterian in Portland.
Yes, Kenilworth. I knew that. And Gail?
I'm from Monmouth, Christchurch, Monmouth.
Christchurch, Monmouth. Awesome. And Anne?
I'm also with Scott and Milt at Corvallis.
Perfect. Love it. Carol, I know where you're from, but maybe others don't.
I'm from Valley Presbyterian, Valley Community, Portland, and we're a Matthew 25 congregation. I'm not a pastor. I feel like I probably shouldn't be here, but hey, I am.
Oh, no, it's actually, gosh, probably 50-50, I think. Yeah. Hey, Lucy, you're from Westminster, I know, but you could tell everybody else. Go ahead.
I'm from Westminster in Salem, and I'm a ruling elder. So we became a Matthew 25 church, but we've had so much going on. We're not as rooted in it, in the service part of it, as we would like to be. And one of my fellow church members is also here.
Nice. Okay. And is that Michelle?
Michelle is also from my church.
Okay, from Westminster, Salem. Thanks, Michelle. And Stephen?
Hi, I'm sorry I didn't hear you say Steve.
Oh, Steve.
I'm the pastor at Christ Church in Monmouth, and I'm looking forward to hearing what you all have to say. I think that we could be a Matthew 25 church, but aren't officially.
Okay, good. Paul, how about you?
Hi, Paul Davidson, pastor at First Presbyterian in Astoria, and I have here Rebecca Duffy, our clerk of session, and we are a Matthew 25 church. Are living that out here. So
nice, thanks, Paul. Sharon?
Hey, I'm a ruling elder. I live in Portland, but I'm a member of Emmanuel Wesleyan.
Emmanuel Wesleyan, awesome. Thanks a million. Amanda?
I'm the pastor of Mount Tabor Presbyterian Church in Portland.
Yeah, welcome to you. We're so glad you're here. Okay. Paul Bells Templeman's with us, and Sherry from our Presbytery office. There's his face. Love it. All right. Hey, Brenna, you want to introduce yourself?
Oh, yep, sure. Sorry, I'm between meetings, so I'm eating lunch at the same time. Sorry. Brenna Dykeman, pastor at First Presbyterian downtown, and we are in a time of discernment on becoming a Matthew 25 church. So excited to hear things.
Oh, nice. Okay. Thanks, Brenna.
Good to see you, Rob.
Linda Jackson Shaw is telling us that she is without sound, and she is from the Redmond Church Community Press. And then Anne, I think, is last but not least.
Yeah, my name is Anne Montague, and I'm a member of Westminster Presbyterian Church, and we're working on becoming Matthew 25. We had started talking about more light, and then we wanted to broaden it out.
Westminster.
I'm sorry, Salem.
Okay, that's what I was assuming, but I, thought I better check that out. Okay, well, see, that actually, what a broad representation, both of, pastors and ruling elders. That's awesome. And so grateful that all of you have taken part of your lunchtime to be with us today. And let me just briefly give you kind of a general idea of what we mean for this to be conversational, to be sure, but it's always helpful. I don't know, maybe I'm just type A enough that I need to know a little bit about where we're headed and what we're going to talk about. So our hopes for our time together would be this, that we would have a time where we could share a brief overview of the Matthew 25 movement, and we are referring to it as a movement within our denomination, and talk a little bit about its biblical roots as well as the three different focus areas. And then we hope to give you kind of a sense of the scope of the movement as it exists today. And to do that, we'll give you just some basic statistics about how many churches officially within our particular presbytery, as well as nationally in our denomination, how many congregations, how many mid-council entities, and also how many just groups within our particular denomination are currently identifying as being a part of the Matthew 25 movement. So that'll give you an idea of the scope. And then Tom and I both are just going to share briefly about our congregation's involvement in Matthew 25 and how long we've been a part of that movement and what prompted us to identify as a Matthew 25 congregation with our denomination. Then we're going to talk a little bit about the recent Matthew 25 Summit in Atlanta, Georgia, which was held it was right after the ML King weekend in Atlanta, and first of its kind. So it was really an energizing gathering. And I know that Tom and I both have some impressions to share from that event. Then we are going to also just introduce you to a few resources that you can follow up with, some of which you may be very familiar with, and also tell you about an opportunity to dive in much more deeply in the near term at our next Presbytery meeting. And then I think lastly, and most importantly, we're going to open it up wide for your questions and comments and observations, and just have a conversation amongst ourselves about Matthew 25. So with that, let's dive in. And Tom's going to take it away and talk a little bit about just the biblical roots of this movement and the three different focus areas.
So there are three main focus areas, but there are three more, and I am going to at least mention those. But those are relatively new, and I will admit that I'm still working into them. But I also don't want to just ignore them. And if you're doing your research and have you go, hey, why didn't he bring those up? But this started, and I am just going to read them, and as opposed to giving my riff on them, I am just going to share what's printed in the materials. So the three foci of Matthew 25 are building congregational vitality by challenging people and congregations to deepen their faith and get actively and joyfully engaged with their community in the world. Dismantling structural racism by advocating and acting to break down systems, practices, and thinking that underlie discrimination, bias, prejudice, and oppression of people of color, and eradicating systemic poverty by working to change laws, policies, plans, and structures in our society that perpetuate economic exploitation of people who are poor. And that's what it started with. And that's what, when we first looked at it, those are the three, as we were making kind of the decisions, our congregation, they let you know you can kind of sign on to all three of those. You can choose one that you think is really the focus of for your congregation. You can try, and by choosing one doesn't mean you have to ignore the others, but those are, I guess, what I liked about it was that was really up to your congregation when you decide to move forward on this. And obviously, if you've been around the Presbyterian Church for even a little while, we've been doing these kind of things. Maybe not exactly in these words, but this is not new to us as Presbyterians. But I also believe that we are all about resurrection, renewal, and rebirth. And I like the fact that Matthew 25 gives us a theological and scriptural foundation to put this on. And it gives us an opportunity to come back to these very important issues as congregations, as presbyteries, and look at them and challenge us by looking at that piece, of Matthew 25. The other three that they've added on just recently are climate change, earth care, militarism, peacemaking, and heteropatriarchy and gender justice. So those came out of, as people were working through those first three, those are things that they were finding were, being led to or overlapping in ways. So those pieces are there as well. But I think what drew me to Matthew 25 was, and I'll say more about this later when I talk specifically about my congregation, is it is helpful, especially when I talk with some of my parishioners or other people outside of the church. And, in this day and age, if you bring up racism or poverty, some people will immediately say, well, that's very political, Pastor. You shouldn't be so political. What are you doing? We're not about politics here. And to be able to say, well, I guess you could say it's political, but I would like to say it's theological and it's scriptural. And that really does help when I have conversations about this.
Well said. Thank you, Tom. We're just going to tell you briefly, and I'll start, a little bit about our own congregation's journeys. Tom's congregation has been a part of Matthew 25 a little bit longer than mine. Some of you know I'm a transitional pastor at Valley Church in Portland. But prior to this, I was doing transitional work at Lake Grove Church, and that too is a Matthew 25 congregation. So in coming, to Valley as a transitional pastor, I had that in my background. And I think we were kind of early adopters over at Lake Grove. And so as time went on, it seemed very natural, just in this church in transition that had a long and rich history of missional engagement in the metro area, to just pose the question, why not consider being a part of the Matthew 25 movement, as it is such a sign of renewed energy and vitality within our denomination, and why not join in and identify with that with the rest of our brothers and sisters within this denomination. There was some concern initially about, wow, is that going to mean we're going to be in a new program and have to do different programmatic stuff? And I said, well, no, actually, what we're really called to do here is reflect on what we are currently doing and be open to what the Spirit may have for us in terms of additional ways that we might, be engaged missionally in our metro area and community and in the world. And so in thinking about it, it felt like a good time to identify ourselves in that way. I will say, we were in the midst at that point, and still are, of helping to resettle an Afghan family. And that, was a new experience for the congregation. And it just seemed like we've gotten into so many different facets of Matthew 25 just through that work of discovering how incredibly difficult it is for people to get into decent housing in the metro area, discovering how difficult it is, for people to keep food on the table. So I don't know, all of that combined together. We are an earth care congregation as well, so that certainly resonated. And it just seemed like a good way to organize our energies as we went through a process of rediscovering our a renewed mission statement and missional direction, and it just seemed to fit well. So that's kind of a thumbnail sketch of our process. Tom, how about you? Oh, and we've been a Matthew 25 congregation 1 year.
I had recently been hired when we started talking about the Matthew 25 program. So for me as a new pastor, it was, I saw it as kind of a good, I don't want to say tool, but a good process. The church had recently done a mission statement, and they were looking to see where the future took them. And this, as Robin mentioned, it wasn't one of those things where I came in brand new and said, okay, we're going to scrap all your mission work and we're just going to, we're going to start brand new with Matthew 25. It was a chance to talk with session and with community committees and see if they felt that this kind of a focus and this kind of a I guess this area, the focus in the area way of doing that was something that looked good to them and made sense to them as they were trying to figure out who they were again. They were definitely in transition. Bethany is a good sized building with a smaller sized congregation living inside of it. So when I went online, it gave me instructions like, form your Matthew 25 committee, with all these people and do this and move forward with this. And I knew we weren't going to form a Matthew 25 committee. Now, some churches can and some churches have, and I think that's great for them to do that. But really, this came to session as it should. And, session, after talking about it, made that decision. And then the process for us was to look at the things we were already doing and see if they fit or if they could fit Matthew 25 better, or as we look to see what kind of things we might need to stop doing that we've been doing for a long time, but no one really was on board with. And if we were looking for other directions to go, we looked at that through the lens of Matthew 25. Now, having said that, a lot of people are like, wow, this is exciting. We should be doing this. And we are so excited about Matthew 25. And then 2 months later, I said, well, as a Matthew 25 congregation, maybe we should think about this. Well, what do you mean we're a Matthew 25 congregation? When did that happen? What is a Matthew 25 congregation? So, from the pastoral perspective, there's been a lot of preaching on it. There's been a lot of newsletter articles. There's been a lot of one-on-one with groups, small groups, and saying, do you feel you fit in the Matthew 25 movement in the work you're doing here? And that's kind of how we've done it. I mean, every church is going to come at it differently. But I guess what I wanted to say is if you're a smaller congregation and you look at some of the guidelines and some of the information, or you look at some of the stories out there that are online and you go, well, I'm not doing this. These are giant churches with giant budgets and all sorts of people, and really that's not the case. There are all sizes of different churches figuring out how Matthew 25 works. Some very small churches, some very large churches. So I encourage folks as they're doing that processing and thinking about it to keep that in mind as well. At one of our officer trainings, we were talking about Matthew 25 and someone brought up that, they still weren't sure what it was. And we spent a lot of time talking about that. And then someone else brought up, well, this seems a little overwhelming. And then someone else brought up, do we have to do all three of these? And I said, of course not. We will do as they come, but so our congregation or our session decided, can we just focus most of our focus on poverty? Because if you're following national news, Grants Pass is kind of being watched right now as what the law has to do with unsheltered folks and what cities can and can't do. So that's a huge issue on both sides of the coin down here in this town. A small town, but incredibly difficult to get affordable housing in. A small town, but still a lot of need for food and food insecurity. So that really became our focus. And some of the things we're doing right now, there's a group called MINT down here, which is the mobile integrative navigation team. And this is a group of folks who are in the parks right now working with unsheltered folks, anything from medical help to helping them through the process of finding homes and shelter, with the end all goal of trying to figure out how to change affordable housing in our community. So myself and other members of the congregation have gotten involved with that, and that fits very well with Matthew 25. And then we also decided to give up a little bit of our parking lot. We wish we had more room to give up for housing, but we didn't. So we gave up a little bit of the grass around our parking lot. And this last year built a small urban garden. And that has connected us better to the children who have a preschool here at the church. It has made more connections to our smaller and larger local food banks and food pantries. It has given us connections again, for our congregation to make connections in the community and in the building. And so again, that has been a poverty as well as congregational vitality piece. So for us, it's been an ongoing and it's gotten people excited about what we do next. But I will admit, there at times for me, it does feel like a lot of cheerleading as a pastor, and that's okay. It wasn't for us something that a large group, grabbed onto and said, here we are to do all the work, and we're with you. It's been more of a gentle, hey, that's what we're doing, and that's what's important to us, or how can I be more involved with this? So that's kind of been our background on it, and it continues to grow, and I continue to be very pleased with it.
Right. We were going to talk just a little bit and share with you about the Matthew 25 summit that was held in January in Atlanta. And I guess my initial impression that I will share with you is that there was a very intentional choice made by our denominational officials that were putting this conference together to hold it in a site. It was not like a conference center, but rather it was in a predominantly Black congregation, PCUSA congregation outside of Atlanta. So I love the choice to have it in a space that provided us with a large worship space, and it was essentially giving us a bird's eye view of a congregation that is deeply committed to Matthew 25 and deeply engaged in the community. And it just, I don't know, it kind of gave a sense from the very beginning of boots on the ground, that this is not about, let's go to a conference facility and talk in kind of 10,000 foot terms about Matthew 25, but rather getting right down to the grassroots level. And that was the spirit that pervaded throughout. I mean, a beautiful combination of worshiping together at various intervals throughout the 3 days, and then breaking out into either large plenary or small groups and talking about, boots on the ground, what different congregations and groups are actually doing, to, realize this lofty vision of Matthew 25. And as Thomas suggested, there were people representing very small churches, very large churches, everything in between. And it wasn't necessarily just, as some might expect, that larger churches with more resources were doing all these wonderfully innovative things. Actually, some of the greatest innovation I was hearing from smaller churches that were faithfully carving out a particular niche and really drilling deeply into their communities and beginning to see the fruit of their labors. So I don't know. Again, the other thing I would lift up is just the energy. Oh my gosh, energy. And this, to me, it just felt like people with a passion of a vision and beginning to live that out, and so much collaboration. Every meal that we shared together, always making a point, at least we did, to sit with different conversation partners so we could learn more about what they were doing in their context. And resources, tons of resources. I came away so proud of our denomination and the way that they are working so actively to resource us to be faithful Matthew 25 congregations. And so I don't know, those are my general impressions. Tom, what about you?
Yeah, it was overwhelming in the best possible way. It was for me, it was nice to be back in a very cultural and racially diverse group of people, and that was powerful. Um, and I could tell you all sorts of stories, but I want to make sure we have plenty of time to get to our questions and answering. But what I think I took away from that, in a number of different settings, said in different ways, was especially when it came um, to dismantling structural racism, because I've heard this, at many different levels in our presbytery, at my church, in my community. Oftentimes people will say, "Well, we're just so white. That's just who we are. We're just so white." Um, and the response to that came up, that stuck with me, throughout different people, not that I went out asking for people to explain this to me, but it just kept coming up, was, even if that's your church, these are important things to be doing and preparing for, and making your congregation or your community open and welcoming to. So if we just feel that we're just so white that there's nothing we can do because there aren't folks of color, or there aren't folks, maybe we're too middle class, um, that I just kept hearing and kept learning, and it kept sinking in that, but that's not an excuse not to be prepared and to do everything that we can to be welcoming congregations, or to be congregations that are out in the community doing these things. Because it is easy and I will speak for myself, it is easy to, to be a white male with a predominantly white congregation, and be stuck in that bubble. So Matthew 25, in all sorts of ways, encouraged me, and I hope to encourage our congregation members, to get out of our bubble and see the people that surround us, because there's diversity. No matter, I don't care where you are, there's diversity in Grants Pass. It might be harder to see it than it was in the suburbs of Atlanta, but it's there. And so that really was the piece, that I heard and took home with me. And whether that was racial diversity, whether that was support of our LGBTQIA brothers and sisters, whether that was looking again from the lens of a middle class church to poverty issues, that it's there. Sometimes we just don't see it. And that's the question in Matthew 25, Lord, when did I see you? And that's the piece that, again, the theological piece and the scriptural piece that I brought home with me from this conference.
So some brief words just about resources. And just before we came on this call, we were made aware, at least I was made aware of an amazing resource that's available to you. I hope you'll take note of this and take advantage of it. Is Siobhan Starling Lewis of our denomination will be at our upcoming Presbytery meeting and doing a workshop presentation at 1 o'clock on Friday. And so I'm hoping that many of you that are discerning whether or not you might want to become a Matthew 25 congregation will take advantage of that opportunity. I have heard Siobhan speak before, and she's dynamic and has much to say, and I'm sure we'll be able to answer questions and whatnot. Tom, you're going to make mention of some other resources as well, right?
Yeah, and I'm not going to talk again too much about it because I want to get to that question and answer. So if you look in the chat at the top there, I put the link to the Presbyterian Mission / ministries / Matthew 25. And if you go there, if you haven't been there yet, there is all sorts of resources there. There is a lot of sometimes it's almost kind of hard to follow. There's just so much of it. There are resources on, there are Facebook groups that are Matthew 25, and there's a lot of different ways to go on that. I was just starting to, because I forgot, but I'm just about to, when I get done talking, I'm going to put my email in the chat as well. Please reach out to me, because again, as kind of this coordinator / cheerleader for Matthew 25, I would love to have more conversations with people, and again, talk about my experiences, or answer questions if you're not sure about where this is taking you. So again, I figure we're all adults here, and you don't need me to walk you through the web page at PCUSA, but I want to give you that, and then surely if you have questions, please contact me, and we can talk as little or as much as you'd like to.
Right. Yeah, so as Tom said, really what we were most excited about, and I think the reason we agreed to help facilitate this conversation is just to do just that, to have a conversation that's meaningful to you and to your questions about Matthew 25. And so I think we just want to open it up. But if you have, a question that you brought with you today, or a topic that you would love to see us say more about, please feel free to unmute and we'll have at it.
Hi, this is Anne. Could I say something?
Sure, Anne.
Okay, hi. Thank you for doing this. I want to tell you, I was so excited somehow that Georgia Summit appeared on my computer, and it was so great, and I was wondering if we might have one over here, but it was so good. And then it just really moved me because I was so glad you had the speaker who is the Lutheran pastor from Palestinian, and I thought it was so important that he spoke. It was I had heard about him, and people don't mostly understand the large number of Christian Palestinians, and so I was really appreciative of that. I was going to say, I'm glad you added the next 3 issues, but I think the issue of peace and anti-war is one that's still hard for a lot of congregations to talk about. And if there are any examples, that would be great. The other thing I want to say, most of my working life, I've been a social worker. I went into it to change systemic poverty. And of course, we know that didn't happen. And I think that move from, like, our congregation is very much into poverty addressing issues. But to move from that to systemic poverty and how that is ended, and all of these issues that are systemic, we can start at one level, but I think eventually we want to get to the systemic nature of those problems within our society. Thank you.
Thanks, Anne. Yeah. How about others? Yeah, Bill.
Thanks, Robin. And I'm sorry in advance. I had scheduled another appointment today at 2 p.m. and it has subsequently been moved up to 1 p.m. So I won't be able to stay. Please keep me in mind, especially if there's going to be a workshop about Matthew 25 at the upcoming meeting at Astoria. And I'm sorry, I'm speaking over you, Paul, but at Astoria, we became a Matthew 25 church in 2020. We have a 50-year-old emergency food distribution center in the basement of our church. And in 2019, the session and members decided to involve themselves in providing housing. The background that you see behind me is one that I have up all the time because since my retirement, I've stayed involved with a couple of volunteer groups. And I want everybody to know that I'm still involved with in 2019, the members above and beyond their pledge went out and bought a derelict building in downtown Astoria. We don't know anything about construction. We don't know anything about alcoholism. We don't know anything about renter-tenant law, but we had a little bit of extra money. And so rather than having the crowned building there turn into Airbnbs or a resort hotel, we convinced the owner that affordable housing could be his legacy, and we bought that building. This is an artist rendering of what the final concept will look like. We own the parking lot next door, which is vacant, and we're going to put a second building in there. And we hope to produce 60 affordable units with the help of the nonprofit housing developer Innovative Housing, Inc., of Portland. And Julie Garver is the primary mover and shaker there. Joyce Garver, her mother, was the longtime choir director at Vancouver First Presbyterian Church. So I'd love to talk about this further, especially if we have an opportunity at a subsequent, an upcoming Presbytery meeting. But what for me has been important about being involved with Matthew 25 is the encouragement that churches, small and large, all throughout the nation, are extending to all of us. It's as if Jesus comes across the water and says, you know, you can't really make much of a splash in the world unless you get out of the boat. And so that's where we are in Astoria. And for those of you who've been following this project, copelandcommons.org, and we are finally ready to apply to the Salem agency that brokers the federal HUD money for affordable housing projects. We're finally ready to apply this April and maybe turn dirt in September. Thanks, Robin.
Oh, super, Bill. Thank you so
Bill,
much for sharing that.
Bill, I just want to jump in. Bill, thank you very much for sharing. And that for two things, I think, you know, we Presbyterians have always let everyone know that we're connectional. You know, and so Matthew 25 adds to that. There are so many ways to connect with different people and to hear those stories. And so that's just, you know, is inspiring to me. I also like, as I hear more stories from people with this congregational vitality, you know, hearing that, you know, years back, you know, churches, I think we kind of were little islands, you know, we look to do things in the community that we would show up and feed, good things. I'm not saying, you know, but show up and feed or show up. And now either we're learning how or by necessity, we're connecting with the community. And yeah, my church wouldn't know how to take care of a building like that either, as far as the law or the rental or any of that. But now to work with other community entities that know how to do that to make it happen. So thank you, Bill, for sharing that, because that's inspiring.
Yeah, beautiful. How about somebody else? Question or comment that you'd like to offer?
Scott.
Hi there. First, Corvallis is a Matthew 25 congregation. It adopted that before I arrived, so Milt and Ann might know more about that than I do. However, I just put in the chat two more links. One is the Innovative Housing group that Bill mentioned, and another is the Square One Villages, which is another Mid-Valley group that's been working with different communities. And Peace Presbyterian in Eugene has partnered with them, and their property is now a Peace Village for low-income housing, and is a really creative way of doing it. So I just wanted to point those out too.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm seeing all sorts of things show up in the chat, so I hope people are seeing that as well. So, is that Milt that has a hand up?
I'm just piggybacking on Scott, because we became a Matthew 25 church in 2021, but then we also, in looking at ourselves, determined we needed to be a affirming church. And it took a while to educate our congregation about what it meant to be an affirming church, open to everybody and anybody. And we did that, and we're still working on that. But then an opportunity came, because we were hosting a mental health clinic service, not really a clinic service, more in our basement. And the possibility of using our manse, which was then currently being a rental to students, to support mental health. And that was agreed to by the session and the congregation, and we renovated the manse, and Authentic Hope Center for Peace and something else, which is a mental health service, is a validated ministry of the Presbytery, directed by Reverend Hillary Roethlisberger, and we are in the process of applying for a Oda Thompson grant from the Synod to expand to educate students that are master's level students training to be mental health providers, to work alongside Authentic Hope and expand the mental health capabilities in our community. And that's just a brand new thing. I mean, we've been at it for 2 years now, and we're making progress, and it's really nice.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that, Milt. That is fantastic.
Lucy.
Well, Westminster has been exploring the need in our community for childcare. And we had a very small kind of upper class co-op child care center that served maybe 15 or 20 kids. And we've been working for a full year on upgrading to a larger capacity childcare, because childcare in our part of Salem is a great need. We're a desert, a childcare desert. So although it seems like maybe that's not directly related to systemic poverty, it is a piece of systemic poverty. If parents can't get childcare, they can't work. And so we've been working hard at that.
I agree. I think that definitely is a part.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's part of that. It's easy to get on that spiral of, trying to find a job that pays enough to pay the bills. But once you get childcare, have you lost the amount of money that you were making to pay? I mean, it's all part of that.
It's been a very long road trying to get city permits and a partner. We're not doing this childcare center ourselves. We are contracting with someone. So finding someone to be a partner with, I think we're finally narrowed it down and have a partner and are moving forward. But there are so many steps. I can't imagine building a building or renovating a building. I mean, just all the regulations and stuff for this project has been profound.
Thank you for sharing.
Others with questions or comments or? Yeah, Scott.
So I invited my worship committee to meet with us at this time today to chat about these things. And my hope is once we're done here, this is mostly for Ann and Milt, but when we're done here, that we'll jump on our own meeting Zoom and talk a little bit about how this interfaces with worship, since our captive audience most of the time is Sunday worship hour. And how do we, maybe other folks have ways that they've done it, but how can we talk about, explore, profess Matthew 25 in worship so it gets out there? Don't hold back. Somebody answer.
I didn't want to jump in right away, so I'm sure other people have good. I will encourage other folks to jump in if you have ideas and thoughts or sharing stories. Scott, for me, it's just been starting with, whether it's been preaching series on that passage, it's kind of the probably the foundation I put things on. But then for me, it's been finding what resources I have, whether that's working with with Kate here, who does our music, and working with her to find hymns or other pieces of music that support that. And you're right when you said, we have that captured hour. So sometimes I've had to really wrestle with how much I do so I don't overwhelm people with it, but also that I'm not just kind of hinting at it. And so, I don't have anything specific to say, oh my gosh, this really worked, other than just encourage people to find ways to, as I think most pastors and worship teams do, to find up ways to lift up the folks in the community that this makes, whether that's bringing in a moment for mission that week for something, or whether that's, doing those other kind of things as well. But yeah, I agree. I think you make a very good point, because that's really one of the areas we've all, written newsletter articles, and we've all put things in the bulletin, and we've all, had meetings that no one showed up for, but we're pretty much guaranteed that people will be there on a Sunday. So.
I will say, Scott, one of the things that for us, again, I stress that at Valley we're just a year into things, not even quite a year into things, but under the heading of "you do not have because you do not ask," late last spring, I had a passing acquaintance with Ray Jones back at the denominational offices, and remembered what a great speaker he was, and knowing that he is deeply involved in promoting Matthew 25 as well as other initiatives within our denomination, I just shot him an email and said, "Hey, would you ever be interested in coming out to Portland?" And he shot an email back and said, "Yes, I would." So anyway, that nice journey. We brought Ray out in September and actually opened it up to the Presbytery. And I know many, if not all of you, were invited to come. But oh my goodness, not only do we have a great Saturday workshop involving Ray, and definitely lifting up Matthew 25 in the context of that event, but also he was our preacher on Sunday morning. And as I was talking with Ray over dinner that night, he just talked about how, oftentimes I can say things that you cannot say. There are many ways that we shape slowly over time as the primary preacher in a congregation, but Ray can just put some stuff out there, as a denominational representative, and it starts conversations that might have taken us months to kind of ramp up to. And so that was really, I guess my underlying theme here is take advantage of some of the denominational resources. People are in Louisville, because of all the travel that didn't happen during COVID. Ray told me straight up, I wanted to come to the West Coast. We hadn't had anybody out on the West Coast doing much of anything for 3 years. So, and we were able to put that together in less than 4 months. So anyway, I think some combination of just the week-to-week shaping that you do in your messages, but also take advantage of some of the resources at the denominational level that are willing to come and want to come.
At Westminster, we've invited, our pastor has shared the pulpit and invited groups or representatives like from Church at the Park who works with the homeless. They have a large homeless ministry in Salem to come and speak on a Sunday morning, and Salem for Refugees, which is another large community outreach.
Nice. Are there other questions that people have brought with them today that they would love to explore as they're working on discerning? Some of you are, others of you are already Matthew 25 congregations. Yeah, Paul.
Sure. Well, I'm trying to discern myself in terms of the Presbytery's role going forward in supporting all of you and all of our other congregations in terms of Matthew 25. It's sort of been a hidden thing, which I guess is what Matthew 25 is about, right? It's about things that are done that are seen by God, seen by Christ, and that we didn't realize we did. But I'm wondering about the ways we can support that. And I know we have a Presbytery meeting coming up. We want to focus on Matthew 25. As Robin said, we'll have Siobhan Starling Lewis there preaching and also leading a workshop. I guess we're calling it a workshop. Not exactly sure what the format will be. But there's other opportunities as well for us to lift up Matthew 25 things. I'm just wondering if Does that, framing the issue that way, is there any feedback that I can take with me from this meeting? Or did Robin and Tom do such a great job that...
Well, I was going to say providing a forum in which, I mean, I just have been really thrilled to hear what many of you have shared that, you know, you're thinking about or already underway with in your particular settings. But gosh, if you're hearing any one theme, I hope what you're hearing is collaboration. Oh my goodness, the days are gone, if they ever were here, of us operating as solo agents. I mean, we are so much more powerful when we're working together on a common cause. So I think, Paul, to answer your question, providing space and encouragement in the context of Presbytery meeting for groups such as this, you know, to gather actually face-to-face in person, and even, you know, regional cohorts to dialogue about how we could be so much more powerful in a Matthew 25 vein working together.
Lucy.
Well, during the course of this meeting, I just went to the Presbytery website and I did a search of Matthew 25, and there are no results if I search on the Presbytery website for Matthew 25. So there's not a direct way to just go there and find out what's happening in our presbytery. You've got to go through the denominational website, and that there is so much there. It's kind of overwhelming when I just really like to know what's going on in my little corner of the world. So that would be helpful to get that.
And Lucy, let me jump, Paul, I want to jump in really quick and speak to that, because coming back from, you're correct, and coming back from this conference, that was a big #1 thing on my list, and a star, because I talked with other folks whose presbyteries did have, you know, a page, a Matthew 25 page, and I think that's important, and I'm not trying to make excuses, but I also don't want to. I didn't think I was going to come back and say, hey, Sherry, guess what I got all figured out for you to do, because you're not doing enough already. So I know we are in transition of trying to find someone who's going to be doing more of that work. Paul, correct me if I'm wrong, but we're trying to find someone who'll be doing more of that kind of work, social media and things like that. And so for me, whenever that person is here, that is a priority, because I think a number of things could happen on that. One, exactly, because it is frustrating when we go somewhere else and there's so much stuff, it's overwhelming. So an easy way to start, and also a forum for churches to then be able to share their stories and their pictures and things like that. So yes, Lucy, you bring up a great point, a valid point, and it is a priority for me. Did someone else have a hand? Carol, did you have a hand up? Or I think someone else had a hand up at one time, or did I miss that? No? Okay. Robin, I'm looking at my clock and it says 1:01, and I'm happy to stick around a little bit longer, but I also know a lot of folks have the next meeting they need to go to. So is it okay if we officially close this meeting? I know you have some places to be too, and that way people can jump if they need to jump. But if anyone does want to stick around for a moment, I'm happy to stick around for a moment.
Yeah, I agree, Tom. I think it probably is time to close up shop. But I do want to thank you all for taking time out of your lunch hour to be with us. And, you know, I know Tom and I both are very happy to be available for further conversation, and really want to encourage you that I think God is on the move. There's good things happening, and I'm just so grateful that we can collaborate and be a part of that. So blessings to you on the rest of your day.
Hey, Paul Bells-Templeman, are you able to stick around for just a minute so I can chat with you when this is all over? Or do you want me to just give you a call if that's better?
Sure, we'll just bill you $8 a minute, but you are free to stick around.
Well, I'll let everyone else jump ship, and then I'll.
Okay.
You're a cheap date, Paul.
Wow.
$8 a minute. Wow.
Yeah. I just pulled that number out of the air, so I wasn't.
Yeah. I've heard that before.
I will speak up and let you all know that the chair of CAT heard that comment about the website. And the one thing that just off the top of my head that I'm thinking of is, do we really want to try, we don't want to try to duplicate what the national site has. So even as an in-between, I'm wondering if we can put up a page that at least links to the national website.
Yeah.
And then says more Cascades stories to come or whatever. Yeah. But at least when they search our website, they get directed to the national if they don't know about it. Because we all know how easy the national website is to navigate. So giving them the direct link might be really helpful.
Yeah.
Right. And I agree. I think, you know, whatever that page on our website becomes, yeah, I don't think it should be us just trying to mimic that. No. But I think if we get some kind of, again, whether that's connections, you know, some connections to what we're doing here, but connections to the denomination, but also just even, you know, contact me if you know, those kind of things.
And there are, I mean, I'm a great fan of just curated resource links, and let me go look myself. The Square One Villages thing at Peace is something we should be publicizing to every single small church that has any land sitting around.
Right.
I think that's just phenomenal.
Yep. I agree.
So those are the kinds of things that even if we just curate some resources, we put the national link on there, we put your link on there where, you know, for information at this time or something. And I wonder if we can work with Matt to put together something semi-quickly. I mean,
and then I think getting, you know, working harder, and I'm happy to do this too, with getting churches to get things into our, you know, into our publications, our Presbytery publications as well. You know, those are good places to put stories.
Interestingly, our new central region, not south, I'd say that clearly, our new central region reporter is having a difficult time getting responses to, he's inviting himself to visit with folks at churches. He is having a horrible time getting response. And we're working on different ways to approach that. He's going to do some networking at Presbytery, but that's also tough if you can't get people to talk. And that's why I made a note about Bill Van Nostrum, because that would be a perfect success story.
Brilliant. Yeah.
Of we don't know how to do any of this, but look what we can do collaborating.
Yeah.
So we can work on that, but there's got to be a way to get people to understand how important it is to share what you're doing with others.
Yeah.
And I don't quite know how to go about that. I mean, he was up interviewing us at John Knox, and honest and truthfully, there are churches doing so much more than we're doing, but he hasn't been able to connect.
Interesting.
And that's frustrating all the way around.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, that's really not an excuse, but an explanation of one of the things we're running into, and not getting responses from some churches. I went, are you kidding me? They turned down the opportunity to get an article in the omnibus about them, you know, or at least have not responded. Let's put it that way. And his email was a good one. His reach out email was good. He's a professional communicator, so we're going to get good stuff from him.
Good.
So,
my observation.
I'm not allowed to suggest directly to the reporters anything that they do, but I will be sending an email to the editor of Omnibus today and giving her some ideas for stories.
Good.
Thank you.
Perfect.
So now we just have to have a place to put them.
Right.
Yeah, my observation is that there's a deep humility in this presbytery, and you'll ask things and you won't hear it. Then it'll come up in a conversation, and you're like, wait, didn't we just ask about that? And then they're telling you this amazing story. I mean, they are Matthew 25. Like, when did we do anything, Lord? And you're like, well, I'm not the Lord, but by my book, you've done this, you're feeding the hungry and providing shelter and clothing. I mean, it's just amazing. And I think a lot of people, I mean, they just think, well, I wish we were doing more. So I don't really want to tell people. I mean, even a larger church might think, yeah, we're doing a lot, but more should be expected of us, right? And then smaller churches is like, well, we're not really doing. You're like, are you kidding? You're doing amazing work. And I don't know I think that might take some proactive work just by the staff and others as well to just encourage folks and to start leading with that. As we're out and about gathering stories to then bring that up.
Well, even if you're out and about and not gathering stories, if you get a whiff of it, my frustration is that you catch those whiffs, but it's not your job to write the stories.
Right.
So with luck, we'll be able to hire somebody who can grab those stories and either write them or get them out to folks who can write them. And we can do it in sooner than a year from now.
Right.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I mean, Smith Memorial Church has a food bank, and they're serving 250 families a weekend. And it was just kind of like it came in passing. Like I was out there preaching, and they're like, yeah, we really wish we were doing something, blah blah blah. And yeah, we have this food pantry that serves 200. And you're like, well, that's an eye-opening number. Would you have told us when you got to 300, or what was your number?
Your threshold.
You're gonna mention that. What's your target? You're missing.
Well, Jesus, 5,000 for Jesus, right? So
yeah, that's true.
We're well below that bar. So
yeah, and we're gonna reduce our freezer size because we only need room for 2 fish and 5
loaves.
So
all right,
okay.
guys, I need to jump off, but
I'll let you go so you two can talk. It's good.
Yeah. All right.
Good to see you both.
Yep. Thanks, Tom. It was fun working with you.
Yeah, Robin, and we need to connect more in the future.
Yeah, right on.
I would like that. So
yeah, well, maybe we'll see you at Presbytery.
You will, at least on Friday. That's what I'm going to talk to.
Yeah, I know. I can't make it Saturday either, but I'll be there.
And I just found out I can't either, but that's okay. So that's what I was going to talk to Paul about really quick. I bent his ear yesterday asking him, was that yesterday or the day before, whatever?
I think it was yesterday, talking about having a Matthew 25 report early in the meeting, which makes sense if it's a Matthew 25 meeting, at least locally what we're doing and put some faces up there.
Awesome.
Yeah. And I don't know whether we want to have a workshop as well, in addition to what Siobhan's doing. Partly I need to connect with Siobhan and find out, what hers looks like, so we don't steal thunder or whatever.
Well, and that was the thing. I mean, I would love to and Robin, if you need to jump, go ahead and jump.
Yeah, I do need to jump. Okay. Bye, guys. Yeah.
I would love to do some kind of a workshop, but I surely don't want to be the one. Maybe a workshop's not the best way to say it, because I don't want to be. I think if I'm going to be there and be available to, talk to people about it, that's great. But I don't want to. I would rather, if I'm going to be there early, I would rather go hear her than sit in a room with me and talk about Matthew 25. So,
yeah, and part of it I think is to ask kind of what she's going to do at the 2 o'clock or the 1 o'clock hour. Is it about Matthew 25? I mean, because there's many things, and then because we have a workshop at 10 in the morning. Excuse me, that's where we'd have multiple options. Like her workshop we're not going to have any competition with her. I mean, we're calling it a workshop, whatever it is, with her presentation, chance for
well, that makes sense. I was
discussion, panel, whatever she wants to do. But then at the earlier one, I was like, well, what are some topics we could do? And then we also have time on Saturday, which I know you're not around, but I was like, well, you could almost have, there's 6 things. You could have 6 different workshops going on. Like, hey, go to one of these based on one of the foci of Matthew 25 or something like that. I don't know. I was just thinking of different ways we could split that up. I'm not sure we'd have enough critical mass to hit all of those, but I don't know. I was just trying to figure out what we're going to do.
Well, and maybe someone from this conversation today, maybe there's someone who's, who has some good success stories that might want to be a Saturday person just to come in and to hear their story of how they got on board and how they moved forward. I don't know if that would be.
Yeah, I wonder if that, a few years ago we had something where we had congregations share about the life of the congregation, and this would be more focused of tell us about, a Matthew 25 thing you've done in the last 6 months or a year or something. Right. And the other thing I keep thinking about is early on in the pandemic when we gave everyone $1,000 for some sort of project, and even if it was like $250 or something, to say, hey, we want, we're a Matthew 25 Presbytery, and we're gonna, here's the money. You get to use it for some sort of Matthew 25. If you don't want to do it, you can always return it to us. But otherwise, do this, and in 6 months, give us a report, not a final report. We learned final report is bad because people are like, this stuff is still happening, right? Like, those are the beautiful projects. It's like, well, we haven't finished yet. We're in the middle of this amazing project and partnership. But I think we could do some really, like, we did get a lot of stories out of that because it was like a condition, right? You gave you the money, now you have to report. Whereas, like, I was wondering, is that why we got all those stories? I mean, the $1,000, it wasn't so much the $1,000, it was the fact that $1,000 was seed money, right? To create, we basically gave out about $100,000, and we figured out that multiplied to like 600,000. With congregations, just matching it and doing other things. But we also got all these stories from folks, and I wonder if, you know what I mean? I'm wondering like how we find out what's going on so we can encourage one another. Because I think there's some really cool things going on that, again, people just don't talk about, and then just in passing, it's like, yeah, we just, solved world hunger, and you're like, well, no, you didn't, but like,
but you came close. Well, and this is, I don't know if I've talked to you about this. I talked with Brian about it back in the day, and it's something I just kind of bring up. It's one of those things I just kind of throw out there, and if people think it's interesting, I'm happy to run with it. And if they don't, I'll just throw it out there again. But have I told you about three practices?
I don't think. Well, remind me. I don't know.
So it is actually a friend of mine and a friend of his got this started a number of years ago, and it's really taken off, and it's really cool. It's not the only one out there, but it is. It got started right before the pandemic, and then it went to a very Zoom, like everything else did. You could do them in person. That's how it originally was done, but it works well on Zoom too. But so basically, it started out more as a, what do you do when you're sitting at Thanksgiving and Uncle Fred makes some just outrageous comment about Trump or the gays or something like that, and you're getting triggered. How do you have this conversation? And the three practices are, and it's basically a mental workout. So you're trying to build muscle mass in this, but the three practices are: I'll be unusually interested in you. I won't leave a discussion or the room because I'm uncomfortable, and I will not judge me by my best and you by your worst. And so the way it starts out is you have and they do training on this, and they have referees, and you can. It started as these kind of confrontational. You would go create, you would create a confrontational framing question. So it might be, all white males are idiots, prove me wrong. It usually has a little bit more to it than that. But so let's say we're going to do that, and 20 people show up, and basically you get 2 minutes to share your thoughts on that.